What's the most unfair thing you've seen? Viewer edition.
Hey folks, this is a quick content warning for the video. There are a number of these stories that have varying degrees of child abuse in them. So if you're uncomfortable with that, just kind of brace yourself, know that it's coming, or you may even want to skip this video. Story 1. When I was in grade 7, there was this girl who I hated, and for a very good reason. The year before, she practically forced me to be her girlfriend and SA'd me nearly weekly for a year. I couldn't get away from her since she knew where I lived. If I tried to break up with her, she'd just come to my house the next day. She also threatened to off herself multiple times. I desperately needed to get away from her, so I reported her vaping to the principal. Keep in mind, we were both 11 at the time. She got really peed off and stopped talking to me. The next year, we were put in the same class. This is because the school counselor saw us hanging out and thought we were friends. That whole year was hell. She told me to off myself nearly daily and would threaten to come to my house and kill my cats with graphic depictions of what she would do to them. She got the rest of the class in on it too. The whole day I would have things thrown at me and people were constantly yelling at me, touching me, and getting in my personal space. This is because the girl knew that because of her I couldn't stand being touched. I've also always been extremely sensitive to noise. The teacher saw all of this and did nothing. One time we were doing group projects with randomly assigned groups. None of my group members were at school that day, and obviously I couldn't ask anyone else in their group. My teacher asked if there was anyone specific I'd like to be with or if he should just place me randomly. I told him he could put me wherever, but to please not put me with that girl. Me immediately got an angry look on his face and asked to talk to me in the hall. We were out there for a while, but basically he said that I shouldn't have said that because how do I think that makes her feel? He had higher expectations for me and hoped I would be nicer in the future. I told him about the bullying multiple times, and the most he's done is talk to the girl and ask her to please be nicer. Obviously that didn't work. Eventually, after months of this, I snapped. I screamed. I told her I hate her and threw an empty plastic water bottle at her. She had just thrown a metal one at me and left a pretty bad bruise on my back. I then started crying and stormed out of the classroom. I got sent to the office and my parents were called. I also wasn't allowed to have a lunch break the following day. I don't know how teachers can possibly care this little for their students. Sometimes I do think that it's teachers not caring. There are unfortunately just crappy teachers and crappy parents and stuff out there. Other times I think it's they just don't see it. And there are sadly a lot of kids out there who might exaggerate these kind of claims, and so teachers aren't as apt to believe it. Doesn't make it okay, but it is something to understand because oftentimes these kind of bullies are really good at manipulating other people and manipulating how they are perceived by people who are not their victims. And it's unfortunate. I hope that you can get some help. Talk to folks that you trust. Do whatever you can. Just, get some distance between you and this person. Story 2. I have a story. When I was younger, I had this pink Disney princess lamp that I absolutely loved. One day, my little brother came in and said, "Do you think the bulb is hot?" And I said, "Yeah, probably." So he touches it, then runs out holding his hand in pain and tells my parents that I made him touch it. What? So my dad came in, took my lamp out of my room, destroyed it, and then threw it back in my room while I was in tears. A couple years later, I got another lamp that was blue that I loved, but not as much as the Disney princess one. And the same little brother walks in, asks me if it's hot, and I say, "Yes, it is. Please don't touch it." Well, this genius touches it again and runs out and tells my parents that I made him touch it. And both times this happened, I told them that I didn't do that, but they didn't believe me. So my dad comes in, takes the lamp out, destroys it, and throws it back in my room. And I cry again. Fast forward a couple years, I never got a new lamp. But it's Sunday and my mom is helping me curl my hair and she leaves the room for a second. And the exact same little brother comes in, asks me if the curling iron is hot, and I say yes it is, and then my little brother touches it and says ouch, and pulls his hand away. Maybe 10 seconds later, my mom walks back in and my brother says that I burnt him with the curling iron, and I start crying because I feel like my dad is either going to destroy it or my mom is going to burn me as a punishment. But through my tears, I hear my mom say, "Really? Because I heard you ask if it was hot." And I feel like that was a little bit of an understanding from my mom, and maybe she realized that I wasn't lying about the lamp incident. I never did get a new lamp until I was 17, so about 11 to 10 years later, and everyone believed my little brother, and still do. Even if he's lying, he still gets away with anything. Thank you for letting me vent. You are welcome. As an older brother to multiple younger siblings, yeah, sometimes siblings will just try and do dumb stuff to get you in trouble or just to test limits and boundaries, and it sucks. But the way your dad handled that is not okay. That's bad parenting. Just every step of that. Even if he believed the little brother and wanted to punish you, to break a lamp that you like and then throw it back in your room while you're crying, plain and simple bad parenting. Dad, I hope that you're doing better and maybe learn to chill out a little.
Story 3. My parents have been divorced for years. Throughout that time, my mom has always respected me and made me feel safe around her and at her house. My dad yells at the smallest things and thought I wanted to change my name out of spite and therefore wouldn't call me by my name. My mom lost custody of me and my siblings, and we were only able to visit her a few days a week. I'm extremely close to my cats that live there, and they're like brothers to me. I care about her and the cats much more than I care about my a-hole dad and actual siblings. Recently, a few months ago, my mom was found in her boyfriend's car with H in it. It wasn't for her, it was for him. Her boyfriend has brain damage, and apparently it helped with the pain. He's since stopped using, from what I've heard. Since then, my dad has forbidden me and my siblings from going to my mom's house. I've seen my mom twice since then, and I haven't seen my cats at all. My mental health has been getting worse and worse because of it. I don't blame either my mom or her boyfriend. They're both good people, and her boyfriend helped her a lot and saved her from killing herself, but my a-hole dad doesn't trust either of them. Apparently, he wants my mom to pay for supervised visits with us and even wants her to pay child support. My mom is pretty tight on money at the moment, and my dad can definitely take care of us just fine money-wise, so he doesn't need it. I hate my dad so much. He doesn't realize how much this is hurting me, and even if he did, he probably wouldn't care. The only thing keeping me alive right now is the hope that I'll be able to see my cats, my brothers again, as well as how sad all of my friends would be. I just want to go home and feel safe. Sorry for absolutely venting everything in a random YouTube comment, but yeah, life is really unfair sometimes. Story 4. When I was in high school, I had an emotionally abusive teacher, and while she did a lot of awful things, the first one that comes to mind when I think of things being unfair is when I came back from French class one day and she immediately asks why I skipped French class. I hadn't skipped class, and she had no reason to think I did since I had never skipped class before, and I knew that we'd had a substitute teacher that day. I even made a point to personally introduce myself to the sub, so there was no reason for her to mark me absent. I proved beyond any reasonable doubt that I had been exactly where I was supposed to be, but I still got detention and a lecture. And I knew from experience that telling another teacher what was happening would, at best, result in me being told that I'm exaggerating, and I'm sure it's not that bad. Let's hear what your teacher has to say. And then my argument would be completely ignored because they never believe the special ed students, especially when it's against their teachers. And telling my mom didn't help because even though she agreed that it was incredibly unfair, it wasn't enough to get her fired. So nothing was done about it, and she continued to be a Balrog and specifically target me because I was the only one who was willing to call her out on her BS.
I wish I had advice for this, but it seems like so many schools operate on the opposite principle that the law is supposed to, where you're innocent until proven guilty. They're just like, someone accused you of something, and you go, I have people that can corroborate that I did not do this thing that you said that I did. And they're like, too bad, you're getting punished. Like, teachers, people in charge of schools, do you have any idea what you're teaching children by acting like this to them? Because you're doing a very bad thing when you do that.
Story 5. I read a story on Reddit about a guy who was asking for marriage advice. His wife was unfaithful and extremely abusive towards him, but even then, he was just trying to save his marriage. I remember the cold feeling I felt in my stomach reading his story because it genuinely sounded like his wife enjoyed hurting him. Redditors encouraged him to stop trying to save his marriage and divorce her, not only for his own sake, but for the sake of his 2 children. Redditors eventually gave the OP the courage to file for divorce, which he proudly proclaimed in an update. His wife found his Reddit post and saw that he was planning to divorce her. She murdered their 2 children in retaliation. She did end up going to prison for it, but her family blamed OP for what she did and actually prevented him from visiting the graves of his 2 children. Reddit really rallied around this guy to help him, but damn, what a tragedy. He lost his 2 children to an evil woman, and the people in his life reacted like he was the bad guy and not her. Story 6. When I was in elementary school, I basically co-founded a group of friends who were all on the same street as me. My time with them was some of the best times in my life. In 5th grade, my family and I went on a cruise ship for a week. It was a good trip, but when I got back home, I found out that there were a bunch of cards from all the friends saying how much they missed me. This was the happiest moment of my life and made me think that these people would be lifelong friends of mine. 3 months later, my parents decided to move away. We were in a pretty bad area of the city. The reality of the situation didn't hit me at the time, but when we were in the car preparing to drive off, I finally realized what was happening. I tried my best to keep the group together, but one by one, everyone moved away and the friend group fell apart. I have no idea what's going on with them to this day. As for my friendships afterwards, well, if 9 out of 10 friendships last longer than relationships, then my love life is going to be almost non-existent. Story 7. When I was in 4th grade, the substitute teacher tried to assert her dominance over the class. So, when everyone was talking, she singled out one of them and said he had to write a spelling list for his crime. In shock, he protested, and the teacher gave him another spelling list. Once she left, he said it was unfair. Unfortunately, she heard that, and he got another list to write. I was next to him, so she assumed I was also talking, and I received 3 spelling lists to write as well. The kid who was originally punished grew mad and at lunch talked about it. We were not allowed to talk at lunch, and the teacher didn't like the tone of his voice, so he ended up at the end of lunch receiving 3 detentions. Once he heard this, he realized that his family would punish him severely for this. The teacher told these events to the principal in a way the student didn't like. The student threw his glasses at the teacher with such force that they shattered right next to the teacher. The kid was suspended.
Teachers and certain elementary school teachers in particular, I know that these are very young students, and especially around 4th and 5th grade, they're really starting to develop morals and testing them. And so they're very frustrating human beings. I used to help out with kids in that grade range. They're tough. I get that part, and you have to deal with them so much more. This still isn't okay. You're teaching such a bad lesson by acting like this. You're not teaching them anything valuable. So I know it's frustrating and it's tough, more than I can understand, because I don't have that job, but I understand well enough that you can't do that.
Story 8. My older brother always broke my stuff and didn't pay for it because it was my fault. But when I accidentally broke his super cheap off-brand version of a Game Boy, and I had to replace it, but he never had to replace anything. My 2 tablets, one after another, I didn't have them at the same time. He broke my laptop, hoverboard, phone, vintage mint condition Commodore 64, my other phone, and I had a Pokemon card collection, and he ruined my original Charizard. We also lived in a 3-room house. My dad got a room, my mom got a room, and me and him should get a room, but no, he kicked me out, and I sleep in my mom's floor on the floor between her bed and the wall. He also got his bike stolen, then stole my bike and destroyed the tires, and it then got stolen, and we got new bikes. He stole mine because he ruined his tires, then got mine stolen again. Story 9. Most unfair thing I experienced was primary school sexism. Teachers, mainly female, were often more lenient and showed favoritism to the girls. Granted, me and my male friends and a few female friends weren't the best students in the world, whereas the girls in my class were more tame. Nonetheless, even in situations with some of the girls acting up, we boys would get in trouble. Of course, I probably have some bias and don't want to come off as sexist, but yeah, that, LOL. Story 10. When I was 19, despite having a full-time job, my parents decided to kick me out, move, and put down my dog. The dog was in their name, so there was nothing I could do. In the end, I went with the dog and held it until the end. The really unfair part was that the vet thought it would be okay to make jokes about it. I told my dog it will be okay, and the vet said, "No, she won't, hee hee." It was very difficult to restrain myself. I complained and nothing happened. Then years later, the place was shut down because they were not properly euthanizing the animals. I think she was a psychopath who got off on torturing animals, and I hope she burns forever in a hell worse than she could ever imagine.
Your parents and your vet sound like monsters. Like, I get that you're 19 and maybe your parents can't afford to have you around, so they might be like, look, you got to find your own place. You're an adult now. I don't think it's great. I think a parent should try and help their kid as much as they can or whatever, you know. You bought them. You brought them into the world. You raised them and gave them their values. If they're struggling to find a place, that's still kind of on you to a degree. But to have your dog put down as part of getting you out? No, I'm sorry. A line has been crossed, and now I hope that your parents friggin' just have diarrhea for the rest of their lives. I'm sorry, I was trying to think of something that wasn't over the line and too bad, and instead I went into kind of comical, but I do think that they sound awful, and your vet sounds like the worst vet.
Story 11. My mom had a hellish life due to her parents causing so much trauma in her life, driving a wedge between her and her brother, stealing from her, insulting her, dragging her name down. All she wanted was to be loved, and I know how she saw the world was warped by her parents. She only recently managed to accept she won't have their love, but still believes she will get an inheritance. My brother and I know better, but I wish we could convince her to let it go. Story 12. Another unfair thing, Technoblade, a former Minecraft gamer, died from cancer. I'm not sure which exactly, but he died last year at age 21, and the video announcing his death is on his birthday. His father cried like so many of his fans as he read out what Techno wrote down for his fans a few hours before his death. He was a great YouTuber, entertainer, son, brother, and friend to many. May the blood god and king of Minecraft rest in peace. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.